Okay, thank you, colleagues, for making it here. I hear the bell ringing frantically outside. And since you're all nicely settled in your seats, and we're getting towards the end of the conference, we'd like you all to stand up and take a moment to stretch with all of us so that we all get a little bit awake. So please stand up. Stand up in your chairs.
Yeah. Especially after lunch.
Yeah. And we're going to reach up to the sky. Deep breath. Think of the air. Think of the clouds. The sun is somewhere out there shining. And reach down to the ground. Think of the earth. And now we just go home. Think of the earth and the plants and the roots under our feet. Somewhere way down under all the concrete, there's the ground beneath our feet. I might not make it back up. Okay, and let's get a nice twist. As you go left and right, think about Asia all around us and the Pacific Islands. And beyond that, the other parts of the earth all around us. And your fellow evaluation people all around you. This is nice. Now you give us a move. What was that one? Do it again. Yes? A reach and a twist. Okay, now Cook Islands, you give us a move. A wave. Thank you. China, can you give us a move, Scott? Ooh, side to side. Thank you. Okay, Sri Lanka, one from you. What's your move? Ooh, a spin. Nice. Nice. One more person to call out here. What are our colleagues over there? What's your move? A reach. Oh, that's a good one. Nice. Oh, you're taking it next level. I love it. I love it. Oh, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
That was good.
So, welcome to what we've described as our Pan-Asian panel on evaluation norms. And the theme of our panel is one size does not fit all, which is something we're really interested to share with you, some of the experiences from our guests, but also really to hear from you and hear your own questions about your own context, the challenges you face around evaluation, and what questions you might have for our panel about how their work might be applicable in your own context. So I'll start out with a very short introduction. And just to flag, there is interpretation. So if you'd like to have the Mandarin interpretation, it's available. Yes, next slide, please. Oops, or I can do it. So when we say evaluation norms, I wanted to talk about just the sort of categories that we have in mind when we say evaluation norms. This could be at the most basic level, definitions. So what do we mean by causality, for example? So the core definitions or concepts that underpin evaluation as a professional practice or as a way of thinking and operating. So we've talked several times in this conference about different glossaries and different definitions that are provided. And then you'll see on the right this nested circles. And so you can have definitions of concepts that are international, maybe that are regional, that are national or subnational, and also institutional. And an example of that from my own context, I should have introduced myself at the beginning, sorry. My name is Megan Kennedy-Schwan, and I head the DAC Evaluation Network at the OECD. And the OECD is a membership organization. So just to give an example from my own context in terms of definitions, we developed definition of the word impact and outcome in 1998. And one of our members, Sweden, then took that definition and applied it into the Swedish context, where in the language, there's not actually much of a distinction. And this is quite common in many languages. There's not a clear distinction between outcome, impact, and results is a more general term. So they had to kind of adapt, and maybe Stefan will correct me in my Swedish. They had to adapt a bit the definition so that it made sense in the Swedish language. And then to give another example from OECD members, in Germany, they took several of the definitions and applied them at the German national level, and I'll actually come to that when I get down to the quality standards. So at the highest level, you have kind of definitions of concepts, key ideas that form evaluation. Then you have what we call evaluation principles, and these generally guide evaluation systems or functions. So those would be things like independence, credibility, participation. In the OECD context, I'll come back to some of the specific examples of that, but just now focusing on the generic. And then you get down at the more specific level of how to do an individual evaluation process or product. And there we have what are generally referred to as quality standards, and those could be more specifically applied to a specific evaluation. You might have, for example, a checklist, a quality control checklist that is used to check the quality of an individual report. And again, you might have quality standards at the international level, at the regional, national, and institutional. And you have ethical standards, so maybe putting ethical as kind of a subset of standards within these others. And then you have the much more practical guidelines, training manuals, guides or manuals on particular evaluation approaches. So the use of theory-based evaluation in complex policy environments, the use of cost-effective analysis, and that gets then much more granular and specific. So when we're talking today about evaluation norms, you'll hear some examples from each of these areas. I can go forward one. There we go. And I've several times asked that our panel not feel constrained by my presence to talk only about the OECD standards, so I hope they will listen to me and do that. But I did just want to share sort of what we view as our overall kind of OECD package of evaluation norms. In 2021, the OECD passed its first legally binding recommendation on the evaluation of public policies, which is really interesting because it defines the role of evaluation, and it alludes to several of the definitions. So that's this kind of definitional level norms. We have the OECD Principles for Evaluation of Development Assistance, which were developed in 1991. So they're quite old. But honestly, if you read them, they're really quite applicable. So it's these core principles of credibility, participation, use. The quality standards for development evaluation were actually developed through a very extensive international consultation process. They were tested, and actually Indonesia hosted the launch event of the quality standards for development evaluation in 2005. And those, again, are focused on evaluation processes and products. And finally, the evaluation criteria, which we've talked a lot about in the evaluation community over the last 3 or 4 years, but really are a relatively minor element of, I'd say, the evaluation packages. So I love to talk about the evaluation criteria. Certain people love to debate with us about the evaluation criteria, but we also really wanted to kind of shift back to looking at the broader sphere of evaluation. And the criteria are really about what are we evaluating? So what are the questions we're asking or trying to answer through evaluation? And I've put in the colored boxes just some of the core principles. So independence, impartiality. And many of these terms can be debated, right? So what do we mean by being independent? Is that actually a word? Is it possible for anybody to be free from bias? Usefulness, sufficient capacity and resources, and evaluations are participatory, so they involve the people who are affected by the intervention that's being evaluated. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to take any quick questions or reactions or thoughts on that before we turn to our panel. Anyone want to come in or jump in? Please feel not too shy. Yes, Stefan, go ahead. Yeah, maybe, because we have the interpreters, so please don't tap the microphone, because we do have interpreters. Just speak. Yeah.
I think when it comes to norms and standards, you should perhaps also mention ALNAP's standards and norms regarding humanitarian action, which is equally important, I would say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so sorry, I was more trying to give a conceptual framework here and not list out the standards. So we will hear a bit about the UNEG standards. The United Nations has evaluation standards. Yes, ALNAP, which deals with humanitarian international assistance, has standards. And I would say the evaluation space in international development and sustainable development is a bit messier than other areas like audit, where you have a variety of different standards across different countries and regions as well. But yes, thank you for flagging ALNAP. Anyone else have something to bring in? Yes, please.
Yeah, in our case also, we actually thought very deeply seriously about the people, how our people, our citizens think about everything, what we are doing from the donor community or at the higher level line ministries, Ministry of Finance, whoever. So that's why we translated the international norms and standards, all these OECD criteria, everything, to fit into our national context, to address the people's needs. Yeah.
Great. So that's a perfect segue to our panel then. Let me hand it over to Shimji, who is the head of the Mongolian Evaluation Association, and will share our first example about national efforts to promote evaluation. And I think the theme I would view around evaluation norms is more and better evaluations, right? So over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for choosing our session and hear about some national and regional level and international level experiences, how we are rolling out all these different norms, standards, code of ethics. So before I go to that, maybe Megan. And just very quick introduction about our Mongolian Evaluation Association. So we are just 2 years old. Actually, last week we reached 2 years old. And we really a product of COVID, I could say that, because before COVID in Mongolia, our case was mostly international evaluators would fly in, and we act as local data collectors or like working in shadow place. However, due to restrictions of flights, they were not able to come. But evaluation was supposed to go on. So there were a lot of biddings and tenders. And my real full-time job is I'm also a researcher, statistician, and evaluator. I have my own company. So we were having a lot of requests from international organizations. Okay, there are these types of opportunities, but we did not have any evaluators. So we would go to internet and look for evaluation methods, and that's how we found out about better evaluation and other evaluation associations, OECD, etc. And then we learned that those international evaluation associations are really a bridge to transfer knowledge to their own national evaluators and create opportunities for opportunities of learning and even consultancy works, and even helping the government to create national evaluation system. So we founded and registered with our the national government. So that's how we were born, with the vision to promote professionalization and institutionalization of evaluation at national level. And we became a member of IOC. It's an international organization for cooperation in evaluation last year. And it's a snapshot of, even though we are only 2 years, we have been growing so fast, almost 50 members. We have 9 board members. Many of them are senior government members and statisticians. Millennium Challenge Corporation Director of Mongolia. And we have our one CEO, Ms. Bayerma, here with us. And then we have membership from all over country, and other countries whoever interested in evaluation, they can become our member. And then if we have experience in evaluation, half of them do not have experience, but they're very eager to learn about what evaluation is, and they would like to grow their capacity building and professional network. And in terms of employment, we do have a lot from private sector and freelance who are doing research and evaluation in NGOs and government. And we have government and public sector members, and Ms. Zwengel, our government official, she herself is our member. So also a student, and half of our members are young and emerging evaluators. Randika was yesterday sharing who is YEE, that stands for Young and Emerging Evaluator, really the generation that would take forward our evaluation agenda in the world. And then in the middle, we have this topical interest group. We identified 7 groups that are in line with our national priority and socioeconomic situation. So we really have big challenge, not only to learn about evaluation, also how we can tailor-made evaluation in each of the sector. I was having talk with EBRD, IET, Veronique. Could you come to come to Mongolia, maybe work in some evaluation? And she said, well, we mostly work in private sector, but Mongolia, we identified, yes, private sector needs evaluation, especially because ESG is becoming so big. So we really have this great momentum of not only to learn about evaluation, also to make it tailor-made to different sectors. And so when it comes to these all international standards and norms, so we have to really come from scratch from Mongolia side, but we do have good resources all over the world. So you can see here each regional and national evaluation association, they have developed in evaluation standards, but it's becoming more popular, or like I would say evaluation associations they did after 2015. So we have Africa regional and Latin American regional, Swiss, UN evaluation group, and Germany. So we have good resource to base on when we develop our evaluation standards. And Mongolian Evaluation Association has been in full swing of efforts to not only promote professionalization, also to institutionalize at national level, supporting our government. So we have this regional Asia-Pacific Evaluation Association. So the APIA is the first to really create a code of ethics at the regional level. And we've been contributing to this document, which will be released in December. Also, we just very happy to share that we just finished translating and review process of OECD, better criteria for better evaluation. So I would like to emphasize that it was a big participatory approach, like all of our 150 members, we would share, okay, who would like to get on translation this voluntary work, and 10 of them really contributed to the full translation of it, and we had 3 rounds of review among our members, and we distributed to 35 national government officials and key international development partners to review them. So hopefully, Megan, we will launch it soon, within next month. You know, this code of ethics and criteria, these are very important for us to roll out in our context, because we have some good benchmarks, but it's a matter of that we hear the voices of our key stakeholders and really make it a Mongolia-made type of criteria and code of ethics. So these pictures, this morning, we have a representative from Mongolia. She just came yesterday evening, and she works for Merit Project, and they funded this translation of glossary of OECD DAC criteria, and we went through 14 versions of it over the past few months, and the association has been contributing a lot, and then under her leadership, it was a very participatory approach involving government, Ms. Wengerl was in good contribution, and so you can see like whatever we produce, we try to make sure it's as participatory as possible and contextualized as possible. And another now big challenge and opportunity we have in the front is to make how we make it how we professionalize evaluation. So I am a member of also IOSC Professionalization Task Force, and the reason why I joined is in Mongolia we like to have credentialed or certified CFA, certified engineer type of those things. So why don't we make evaluation as a profession, like certified or credentialed evaluator? So our members are very excited about this opportunity, and we are going to learn more from the Canadian Evaluation Society, which they have the credentialed evaluator thing. So yeah, so we will make it in the next few years as a credentialed evaluator mission. Okay. Yes. Oh, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and I love this idea that you're coming from COVID and the context of what does it mean when you suddenly have the international helicopter evaluators disappear. Maybe lots of good things. So thank you so much for that, and for all the work you've been doing in Mongolia. I think it's a really powerful example. Let's go to Ahmed from the Islamic Development Bank to share the West Asian perspective.
Thank you, Megan. For those who were there in the morning during the session, sorry to have me twice a day. For those who are just here for this session, I'm Ahmed Abdel Gawad. I'm representing the Islamic Development Bank. I'm an evaluation specialist there, representing the Department of the Independent Evaluation Department there. So let me start the discussion by emphasizing on, however, we have a kind of standard norms for evaluation norms and standards, but one size does not fit all. It needs to be a bit contextualized. It needs to be a bit processed through a stakeholders' discussions in order to be uptaken and utilized by the context and norm and the culture itself. I'll center my discussion or my words around 3 points. The first one is around the effort of the bank over the last 20, 30 years in that regard, in adapting OECD DAC criteria, and we also work on LNAP criteria, especially on emergency context in Syria, in Yemen, in other fragile contexts as well. So that will be the first topic. The second point will be what are the benefits out of this adapting those norms and standards to our context. And when I'm talking about our context, I mean mainly West Asia, or what we call as MENA region context, with the kind of Arabic framework and Arab-speaking language. And the third point will be what were the challenges. And what applied in one context can, to some extent, frame what kind of challenges that we can see in another context. So let me start with the effort itself that we had during the last 20 years, starting with development of the OECD DAC criteria, having it translated into Arabic. I mean the glossary of term. And this is the first book to have. Glossary of term means what does evaluation mean? What does monitoring mean? You know, if 2 or 3 professionals, evaluation professionals, or even developmental professionals talk about outcome and outputs and impact, they may end in conflict at the end of the day. So you can imagine if you are translating those terms into another language with another kind of meaning and perspectives, then it's not an easy process. It should be a consultative, rigorous process in order to be utilized and uptaken. So we started in 2008 with a glossary of terms, translating it, and we relied on the OECD DAC criteria on that. We relied on the English version and French version. So we have a triangulation of the meaning of some terms from two language and try to get it to the Arabic. After that, we start a consultation process with the different stakeholders, including the linguistic people and also the developmental and evaluation professionals from across the region. And that was back in 2008, and we developed this glossary of terms in Arabic. In 2012, we worked again with the OECD, we worked with the African Development Bank, we worked with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in UAE on translating of the evaluation norms and standards. So we did it in a collaborative effort and using the same approach, using the discussion with the stakeholders from Morocco to Middle East to Gulf area, because it is diversified regions or sub-regions, let's say. So that was the second step. Last year we started the discussion, or maybe 2-3 years ago, we started the discussion with OECD on that we need to update those glossary of terms of evaluation. Even OECD themselves, they need to update this glossary of terms. A glossary for evaluation which was developed back in 2008 may not be that appropriate or may not that be inclusive for all the evaluation terms that we have right now. And they started this work and they developed their version, which was launched, I think, last year with the English version of the glossary of terms of OECD. And we are taking it forward to update the glossary of terms also based on the Arabic, based on the English and the French versions to come out with the Arabic version. And we even contributed with some terms to the English version itself. So it is a two-way discussion, not just a one-way, which is what Megan emphasized on at the start. We should not take it as a kind of Bible and we adopt it. We should also think about how this can fit our context and how we can reflect on it and how we can adapt it to our situation and our context. But why we should have this criteria and not leaving it to each country to develop their own or each sub-region to develop their own? I think maybe it's important to think about the comparability. It's important to think about credibility of the work and the evaluation work that we have. It's also important to emphasize on the meta level of evaluation. So if you're thinking about the meta evaluation, how you can think about meta evaluation from this region and you don't have a kind of standardized evaluation coming out from this region with specific methods and specific approaches. So that's one of the benefits of it. Accountability is another dimension. The capacity building is the third dimension, which is an important. While we are doing the process itself, we are learning. We are learning. Young emerging professional evaluator is another dimension that should be added to that process as well, which is emphasizing the importance of involving all the kind of sub-region, involving all the level of expertise when it comes to developing a document that should be adapted by all professionals in this region. I think knowledge transfer is also one of the components which is important to be emphasized on when it comes to developing such glossary or such norms and standards documents in the own language, and also having the reflection on the culture needs context, which is very important when it comes to translating some of those terms, how it should be culturally sensitive terms, how to be adapted to that region and that context. What I'm talking about may not be just only for Arabic, but maybe also for our local language, for our own language. I think it also needs to be that in that dimension. Coming to my last points, which was the challenges that we faced throughout this process. I think one of the challenges is the linguistic challenge, which is sometimes you have a word with different meanings in the language, though the Arabic language is a bit complex with kind of rich words, but again, how to get the most accurate terms that represent the needs or that represent that evaluation word, this was a kind of key challenge for us when it comes to the evaluation glossary. the legal and regulations aspect as well. That's why we didn't do it on our own. We try to partnership with OECD. We try to partnership with the African Development Bank, because African Development Bank is also supporting North Africa region, which includes Arabic-speaking countries. We try to support and get allies with the Middle East MENA Evaluation Association and all those kind of professionals who are in this evaluation context, and try to push it to the League of Arab States as well in order to be adopted and adhered to. And this will take me to my last word, which is, it's not only about developing the documents. It's about using it and adapting it. And in order to make sure that it will be used and be usefulness, it has to be inclusive for the involvement of the different stakeholders. So we cannot do it in a remote way. We cannot do it on our own and then impose it on the countries or on the region. It should come from them. Our role should be just kind of coordinating and organizing and mainstreaming it to the direction that fits the global norms and standards. I'll stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. And I'd like you to just kind of take note of any questions you might have on Ahmed's example from the Islamic Development Bank and from the Mongolia example we heard before. We will keep going, but we'll open it up soon for questions, unless somebody has a very burning question or clarification. Okay, we keep going, but please do write down your questions. Yes, let's go to Erica, now bringing in also a regional perspective and sharing some of the really exciting work that's been going on in this region as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Megan. So, hi everyone. My name is Ana Erica Lareza. I'm from Philippines, board member of Asia Pacific Evaluation Association, and also a co-founder of Evaluate Asia. So if you are not familiar with APEA, it's essentially a VOPE. VOPE stands for Voluntary Organizations for Professionalization of Evaluation. So these are organizations scattered all around the world on regional and national levels, focus on capacity building evaluators, and of course, advocating for evaluation. And Evaluate is also a network for young and emerging evaluators. If you haven't heard of them from the presentations yesterday of UNIDAP, so this is a network focused on capacitating young evaluators, especially those who do not have access to them, especially in our region where there's no institutionalized evaluation is not institutionalized, and there's no formal education where you could get to become an actual quote-unquote evaluator, like to have that title. So yeah, this is just like, one of the main challenges that we have in the region and still exist. So this is me very passionately speaking about it because I'm still facing about it. Yeah, and aside from these basic challenges that are faced all around the world, even in other regions, we also have this unique context in Asia wherein we are very diverse. We have a lot of languages to deal with, and in most cases, we clash culturally. Even just the way we talk, sometimes there's an argument just because of how we state things. So this is, this is just an internal problem. And when it comes to international norms, fitting that into the Asia-Pacific context is really quite difficult. So, we are in this, APEA is in this unique position to be able to lead some of these aspects that, lead solutions to these aspects that Jimgi and Ahmad have been talking about. And so, when COVID happened, and for me personally, COVID is I benefited on the COVID because, as a young evaluator, I can't participate in conferences like this with the expenses, the financial barriers. So COVID, everyone shifted online, and Asia Pacific Evaluation Association was able to leverage that, make use of people's time now that everyone's on computer, and gather everyone in one platform or Zoom. And we established this, what we call the Asia Pacific Evaluation Strategy. And it's essentially a strategy for the whole region on advancing greater use of evaluation so that national countries in Asia Pacific are able to deliver on their national development goals. So this strategy have eight themes. So and it's focused on professionalization, partnership for evaluation, strengthening community ownership and evaluation, promoting young and emerging evaluators, engaging with parliamentarians, advancing national evaluation policies and systems, evaluating SDGs, and then the last one is strengthening VOPEs such as APEA. And so it was because of this strategy that everyone was able to streamline solutions that we needed to focus on the region. And I wanted to highlight that for this strategy, one of our main focus is using participatory approach. And I'm very proud to say that, in developing this strategy and the steps forward to it are all activities that have been worked together by many evaluation professionals in the region from many countries. And we have Kim Gi here have talked about the professionalization of evaluation, and they have developed the code of ethics. And then we have Sir Miral here, who's also part of the Asia Pacific Parliamentarians Forum, helping engage with parliaments all over the region to capacitate themselves in evaluation. So these themes have thematic groups all working to develop materials, taking all of these international norms, all of this wealth, and be able to contextualize it in Asia Pacific. So one of the example is the OECD DAC criteria, and how, for example, for this criteria, how is it useful for parliamentarians? So for one of their work is, so one of their work is taking each criteria and being able to, be able to explain it that, in a sense, that parliamentarians could use the criteria. So the point is for the parliamentarians to understand the criteria, and so that when they join parliamentary debates, they know what kind of questions to ask to make sure that the programs that the government funds is actually relevant, is it sustainable, is it effective, is it have relevant impact, so on and so forth. So each criteria has been explained very well. And these brochures, 6, it's all available online, downloadable everyone for free. Each of them is also being translated right now in multiple languages. We already have one in Tamil, one in Sinhala, one in, what's the other one? Malay. And then we are developing one in Nepali. And I believe Maya is also going to be translating it in your own language. Yeah, so so this is just one example of it, of how we take these international norms into specific context that we have identified as a need. So yeah, and other examples that we've done this is, for example, if you were able to join yesterday's Leaving No One Behind session, we are taking Africa's protocols and ethical guidelines on conducting indigenous evaluations, and we are contextualizing it in Asia Pacific context. So right now, APEA, in partnership with EVAL Indigenous, we are developing a toolkit on how to conduct such evaluations in our own context with all of the glossaries, and and then also mapping of the experts in the region. We also have for in terms of capacity building, we just recently released this is MNE model curriculum. So this is it's just a handy booklet that anyone could use. So if you want to develop a capacity building program for your own organization, there's one that you could develop for 1 week course or a year course or 2 years course. And then we also have the professionalization competency framework. So what kind of skills does young evaluators need to have to become a relevant evaluator, to have the relevant skills and methodologies to know when conducting evaluation in the region. So, and so on and so forth under these 8 thematic areas. So, yeah, that's just some of the examples that we do, and for sure, like, there's more, and then we also need, and of course, because this is still a participatory approach that we are trying to make sure that we still need a lot of help. So, yeah, I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then we'll turn to our last presenter on the panel, which is a duo, actually, from UNICEF. So Jane Mwangi, who is a regional advisor for the Asia-Pacific region based here in Bangkok, and also brings experience from other regions. And we are also joined virtually by our colleague Xin Xin, who's the UNICEF advisor for China, North Korea, and Mongolia. So we come back to Mongolia. Jane, please.
Thank you very much, Megan. Very pleased to be here. I moved to this region a few months ago, so I'm still learning, and it's actually a very pleasant surprise to really see how the evaluation culture has evolved in this region. And I think for me, importantly, for UNICEF, and this is something that we all say, and the evaluation director reminds us all the time, is that we do evaluations to do better for children. We want to ensure that we are undertaking high quality evaluations, that we are planning well for them, that we are using rigorous methods, and that we are using the evidence to do better for children, and especially those last children during this last mile before we get to 2030 and the end of the SDGs. So for UNICEF, we have been supporting evaluations for a very long time. And I know that one of our key areas that we continuously struggle with and determine how we can do better is really how to enhance that evaluation culture. So we have been working in many parts of the world, the regions. We have 7 regional offices, and IAPRO is one of them, and we have another one in Asia, which is based in Kathmandu. And supporting NECD activities is really a core business of the evaluation function for UNICEF. We now have a revised evaluation policy. It was presented to the UNICEF Executive Board only last week, so it is still very fresh. And I can tell you for sure that NECD and partnerships for evaluations has really been given more prominence than previous policies. So what does this mean for UNICEF? It means that we recognize that, yes, we do need to undertake evaluations, do them very well, and ensure that we are promoting the culture of using evidence generally, including evidence from evaluations. We also recognize that as UNICEF, we can't do it alone, and that's why we're always very pleased and very happy that we are, in one way or another, partnering with many of these colleagues here and agencies to really just promote that culture. So we have been supporting a lot, including in this region, working and developing monitoring and evaluation framework, policies, and strategies. I know we've also been developing and supporting tools to translate these policies, strategies, guidance, checklists, just to ensure that we have documents that can help us to be consistent in our understanding of evaluations and all these different terms that as evaluators we are using. Yeah? We've also been supporting standards and competency frameworks, glossary of terms, etc. So there is a lot of support that UNICEF has been, that we have been, supporting in many of the countries, but very, very importantly, not doing it alone, working with our UN partners, and also working with governments and other partners just to ensure that we are all on the same page. So that aspect of not leaving anybody behind, and also very, very importantly, to ensure that we are also meeting the countries where they are at. I liked that term very much, that even in this region, the capacities to plan, undertake, and use evaluation findings differ, from country to country. So it is how do we meet them and how can we enhance to ensure that we are getting to that point. Then, of course, we're also working a lot on individual capacity development. We do have a number of courses and trainings that we have been supporting. And then also importantly, country-led evaluations. We do see, and not only UNICEF, but also other UN partners, we do see these as low-hanging fruits in the sense that we can plan for these evaluations and undertake them and support governments. It's like a process, of actually doing evaluations but not doing it ourselves, ensuring that government is leading in many of these aspects. So to conclude, it's just to say that yes, I'm new here, still learning, but I'm very excited and happy about the work that we are doing, not only as UNICEF, but also as UN, to ensure that, yes, indeed, all these, the ethics standards, the principles, the norms and standards can really be better understood and utilized so that we can do better evaluations overall. And then I forgot to say that, by the way, I'm only here because Ching Ching is not available. She's elsewhere for now. So I said I will just come in to say a few words and then open it up for her to, Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Jane. And let's turn then immediately to Xin, who will be joining us via video. Not live, though, so if you have specific questions for her, you can give them to us. We'll follow up after. Yeah. Then you might want to put on the interpretation, unless you understand Chinese. And that gives you a chance maybe also to move a little bit more again. I won't make you stand up again, but
unless you want to.
It's coming.
非常感谢Jane的介绍。大家下午好。那不能够亲自去曼谷来参加这个国际评估周呢，是有很大的遗憾。那也希望在这里呢，能通过分享这个录音的方式呢，和大家就这个联合国儿童基金会在中国和蒙古国办公室推动评估发展的情况呢，进行一个介绍。那我们首先来看中国的案例。我对中国的案例的总结呢，是从对评估准则的翻译到应用。中国对于这个国家评估能力建设的需求呢，是和它的国情有着非常密切的关系。我们在评估的时候呢，经常发现说，国际专家在短期内呢，可能难以充分了解中国的国情，并且出于各种考虑，相关的政府部门呢，也更希望有本土的这个团队来进行评估。还有一个呢，就是语言的障碍，因为大多数的这个文件呢，只有中文的这个版本。所以呢，就是新冠的流行呢，在新冠流行期间，我们呢实现了一次完全由中国本土的学者和研究人员组成的评估团队来完成对于国家卫健委和联合国儿童基金会合作进行的儿童早期发展项目的这个形成性评估。值得指出的是呢，在这个评估刚刚开始，评估这个团队选定以后呢，我的同事就注意到了这个对评估团队进行能力建设是非常必要的。我刚才讲过，这个评估是由这个学者和研究人员组成的团队来进行。那么高校的学者呢，他们精于的是研究，但是未必有足够的经验呢来进行联合国系统的评估，或者呢，他们未必熟悉经济合作和发展组织下面的经合组织下面这个发展委员会制定的一些国际评估准则。那联合国儿童基金会就决定首先对评估团队进行能力建设，因此呢，也萌生了翻译这个经合组织的这种关键性文件，就是采用更好的准则来实现更优质的评估准则的概念界定和应用原则这个文件。那我们翻译了 文件以后呢，就对评估团队呢跟他们进行了分享，并对文件的应用呢进行了这个解释。随后呢，我们马上就意识到说，其实这个文件如果翻译成为正式的这种经合组织认可的这个翻译件呢，可能对评估在整个中国国际发展领域呢都会有所推动。就是基于这种考虑呢，儿童基金会呢和这个总部位于上海的亚太财经和发展学院，也就是我们亚洲评估周的这个主办方之一吧，共同协作，进一步呢提高了这个翻译的质量。那最终呢，这个译文呢获得了经合组织的官方认证，并且在2020年的亚洲评估周期间呢，由经合组织正式的推出了。那最近，联合国儿童基金会也再接再厉，完成了对经合组织评估术语表的这个翻译，并且该译文呢也很快会得到经合组织的官方认证。那有2点启示，我想从中国的这个案例里面来提取一下。第一点启示呢，就是说翻译呢是一种手段，而不是一种目的。我们对于这个准则或者是术语表的翻译呢，这个最终的目的呢是使用译文来把这个翻译文件作为一个工具来进行评估的实践。因为评估是一种只有通过实践才能学习、才能掌握的这个一门技术、一个领域，所以单纯的翻译呢，绝对不是我们的目的。另外呢，我们在应用这个经合组织的评估准则中，我们也发现呢，就是说，评估需要提出并回答正确的问题，而不是在没有充分考虑各个评估的这个背景还有预期目的的情况下来机械的应用经合组织的评估标准。这个呢，是在很多的，就是在几乎是就是在所有的国家的这个评估实践中，这个都是应该被注意和这个应用的。这是中国的情况。那现在我们再来看一下蒙古的案例。那我对于蒙古案例的总结呢，是通过建立合作伙伴关系来推进国家评估能力的发展。由此可见呢，这个背景和我刚才讲的中国的这个案例背景是完全不一样的。那在联合国儿童基金会，在蒙古国联合国儿童基金会是同样推动了对于经合组织的评估准则的翻译，并且呢，我们把这个翻译作为一种平台，借助它呢，促进了政府部门和民间的专业评估志愿组织之间的合作，来共同推进蒙古国的评估发展议程。首先我要指出的是，对于这个评估准则的翻译呢，是蒙古国的本土这个评估志愿组织，也就是蒙古国评估协会，自发的来积极响应经合组织对于这个准则翻译的这种倡议，而翻译的本身呢，也和蒙古国的这个评估委员会本身的这个价值和这个它的宗旨相一致，是他们主导的把评估进行专业化和制度化的努力的一部分。那今年6月份的时候呢，我和 Jane 就是儿童基金会亚太地区评估负责人呢，访问了蒙古国的首都乌兰巴托。我们在那里也很高兴地注意到说，蒙古国的内阁秘书处和加拿大政府资助的一个项目叫做 Merit 的项目呢，也正在合作翻译经合组织的这个评估术语表，而且呢，翻译这2个文件的这个不同的组织，也就是翻译这个准则和术语表的这个各个组织，像蒙古国的评估协会，还有内阁秘书处以及加拿大政府资助的这个 Merit 项目人员之间呢，他们是有着这个稳定的合作，互通有无的。那联合国儿童基金会观察到这一种情况以后呢，就马上就决定了，就是说我们要支持这个对于这个文件的翻译。那由我们 当地的办公室的同事呢，为确保翻译质量提供了技术支持。另外呢，我们以翻译为契机，也推动了主要的政府合作伙伴和民间的专业评估志愿组织来参加儿童基金会的各种关于评估的旗舰培训项目，并且促成他们之间在这些评估培训项目之间的这个互动和伙伴关系的形成。举2个例子，比如说现在9月份还有10月份正在进行的，我们有一个这个线上的为期6周的中级评估课程，叫 Impress。那我们就吸收了30多名的蒙古国的官员和评估人士来参加到这个培训中去。在这个培训里面呢，他们会有这个充分的互动。另外呢，我们还计划邀请2名蒙古国的内阁秘书处的官员，在今年的第4季度来南非参加一个为期2周的中国中期评估课程，叫做 Excel。随着这个经合组织准则和这个术语表被越来越多的这个蒙古国的政府官员和评估专业人士接触到并且使用呢，以及这个双方的评估供求双方的这种能力的提高，我们很乐观地认为，在蒙古国的这个评估格局呢，将会在不久的将来有重大的突破。以上呢就是我介绍了2个不同的这个案例，中国和蒙古以及联合国儿童基金会是如何在不同的背景下应和当地国家的需要，对他们这个评估的能力发展建设进行支持。那在最后呢，我要感谢我联合国儿童基金会的在蒙古和中国的办公室的同事，因为这个翻译工作涉及大量的这种初始的翻译还有校对工作，我们的同事投入了大量的时间精力，成功的翻译这些文件呢，和他们的这种付出是分不开的。我要特别感谢中国办公室的严芳女士，还有王旭女士，以及蒙古国办公室的Kugi Dashdorij 女士。最后呢，我也谢谢大家，谢谢你们耐心听我介绍这2个案例。
So thank you all, and thank you to the interpreters for making it possible to include others in the session. So maybe we give one chance. I won't force you to stand up, but just wave your arms up in the air. And we've been to Mongolia. Maybe it's over there. We've been to Syria. It's over there. We've been to China, and we are coming back here to Bangkok. So thank you. Let's hear from others. Some of the words I heard, I really thank Ahmed for bringing up this point of why do we try to have common standards? And I think this is a key point that we've heard a lot about in recent discussions. And earlier today, for example, we had a session on infrastructure. So if you look at sustainability criteria and its use and application in different evaluations, you can start to consolidate knowledge around what are the elements contributing to sustainable infrastructure. If those elements in evaluations are covered under 4 different criteria in all different evaluation reports, it makes it much more difficult to consolidate evaluative evidence. We also had a session earlier today on artificial intelligence, AI, and I think there's another element where if we're using different terms to mean the same thing, it becomes much more difficult to use these emerging technologies which are based on the speech and the language that's in written texts. So I think the fact that we have some standardization even across different languages will support us to adapt those technologies more quickly. I also heard, though, some concerns about how this plays out and the word conflict even, about how we understand these different terms, how we adjust them in our regions. We already heard somebody, our colleague from Sri Lanka, sharing an example from there, but would love to open the floor now to your questions to the panelists, your own reflections when you think about your national context. What resonates? What resonates in your national context? Is it local? Is it regional? Is it a neighboring country that you're quite fond of, that you want to be like, and so you use their standards? Is it a neighboring country that you dislike and therefore do things differently from? Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question for Shingmi. So now we have all these standards and norms in rolling out in your country. How do you make the other evaluators and everyone aware of this? Because you can have all the documents, but they need to be trained, right? They need to know what the standards are. Some people don't know. So how do you get the word out? You all have trainings, and I think you have to make people aware, right? These things are there. So what's your strategy?
Thank you, Randika, for the question. So because it's a voluntary organization for professional evaluation, everything we do is voluntary. Like all of us have full-time work, but sometimes in the past 2 years, I sometimes stop and wonder, almost 70% of my time a day is given to all this voluntary work, and all my real work is all jammed, and then I have to fight with deadlines after deadlines. So, and then the challenge is, firstly, it's a very emerging field for the Mongolians ourselves. And secondly, because it's a voluntary and everything we do is from our finance, from our own pocket, even coming here, we all pay ourselves. So just maybe to roll out all these norms, standards, knowledge products, we were talking amongst ourselves all these days. It would be great to meet some of the international organizations and see how they can convey some knowledge to us. And we are grateful to UNICEF also starting this Impress course for allowing us to virtually attend. So when we roll out, we of course would be very happy to cooperate with OECD and launch it online. Also maybe one day kind of this evaluation open day, we are dreaming about one day evaluation open day and invite all the international organization representatives, consul and embassy people, and academia, CSOs, government. And then, there's the glossary, there's the criteria, and it's really all about using it. As Shinshi mentioned, it's not an end itself, but it's really a matter of using. So we have a lot of work to do to make awareness raising of these documents and going around. We have 21 provinces in big land, so maybe even go some of the places and really have some workshops and do some case studies. So we would love to invite also, if any international organization would love to cooperate, welcome. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And I think also a couple of reflections from my side, and then I'll invite others in the panel as well to come in on this question of how do you get it out there. And I often think of this evaluation pyramid of the individual skills, the institutional level, and the enabling environment. And I think a lot of work has been done at institutional levels, so adapting standards into not just languages, but then institutional guidance. So I think of Germany, for example, one of our members, they've taken OECD standards, translated them. They have a German language group that's with Switzerland and other German-speaking countries. They have developed German versions of the documents, but then they've also developed within the German evaluation policy their own standards. And then the implementing agencies like KfW and GIZ then have also their own policies and manuals. Then it gets incorporated into staff training, staff onboarding. It's part of the performance review cycle, and it gets quite institutionalized. I think there's also a lot of work at the individual level, but I think we often neglect a bit the enabling environment. And there's that saying that, culture eats policy for breakfast. So you can have the best policies you want. And I've certainly worked in institutions before where you had on paper very good evaluation systems, but the culture was one of fear and punishment. And so in that context, it's very difficult. So two things I think that work well for the enabling environment and maybe are important to keep in mind in sharing these norms and standards and developing them is the political buy-in at the very top. And so I remember at the Islamic Development Bank, for example, when we launched our trilingual glossary that Ahmed mentioned, the president of the Islamic Development Bank is at that meeting. Now, he's not the one who's going through in the footnotes looking at the precise word for results versus outcome, but it's very important that he makes a speech about the value of this product and the importance of evaluation, and is setting that tone from the very, very top of the organization. And I think the other thing that we've seen work in different contexts is having a positive win. So identifying an actual evaluation that is in demand, that there's a real question that people have, whether it's about a national cash transfer program or a school feeding program, the nutrition intervention, and actually doing an evaluation is so important. And I'll tell you, even within the OECD, where we're eating and drinking the criteria all day, every day, when we were developing our framework for this large COVID-19 strategic evaluation that's ongoing now, we still had debates about, is this relevance? No, actually, I think that's an effectiveness question. So when you actually start playing with these concepts on a specific project and in a specific context, it becomes much clearer, and it's important, I think, to have those sort of build the path by walking, because we can talk a lot about capacity development, we can do a lot of training, but unless you're actually doing good evaluations, I think it's very hard to get that traction. Yeah, other thoughts? What have you share? Yes, please, here in the back. Oh, and then I'll come back.
Yes, I'm Sanath Mange from Sri Lanka, representing Save the Children. I think this is going to be most probably for the Asia Pacific evolution for you. I think that based on these development partners, norms and standards, then you have developed, you said that you have developed strategies for the Asia Pacific region, right? Mm-hmm. So, and also this is also common for others as well. But have you done any studies or any kind of things so then how is used by the others, different countries, right? So because you develop for the Asia Pacific regions and then you translate it into the local languages, how is it useful? So then how is used by those other countries and how is adaptation to their system? Any things have you done in any studies or that kind of thing, even the other donors?
Yeah, so examples of how it's used in different countries, and have there been studies? You want to come on? Yeah.
So if we're talking about specifically the strategy, as I've mentioned, it was a participatory approach. So the strategy was not certainly developed overnight. It was a whole year-long process of a lot of consultations, like series of consultations with academics, with professionals, with young evaluators, with government officers and parliamentarians as well. Series of consultations identifying what we need for the region, each. And then, for each need, what actions should we take? It was a lot, and then for each, so in those consultations, summarized what thematic areas, just grouped on the need, and then each thematic area have its own theory of change model. And so it's a. It was a lot of debate on how just the TOC for each of the thematic area, the 8 themes that we have identified. It was a lot, and I can't emphasize on how difficult that was. And so, of course, definitely it was just gathering them in one Zoom meeting was already difficult. Imagine if we done studies for it, it's much more. It would be a very bureaucratic process. So it was also conducted with urgency. So we found that these consultations was the most viable option for us to do. And we believe that it was much more effective this way because each of the participants in it also had ownership with this strategy. So that's why I was saying each theme has its own working groups. Each working group led its own activities, all of it on a voluntary capacity. That's how much passion and time that each people in this thematic area have dedicated on it. And it's not just people in Asia Pacific. We also have international experts helping on developing this strategy in each of the TOC and in its implementation as well. As Shimji has mentioned, most of these people, they spend most of their time work on a voluntary basis, and some of us are just lucky that our day jobs overlaps with these activities, that they are able to, sustain this kind of work and advocacy for such. So I hope that answered that question. As for like specific need for each country, definitely it comes on, like, it comes with like, okay, we talk to people in settings like this virtually as well, and they would say, oh, we need this. But the thing is, we also need manpower to do them, right? So like, yes, if there is a need, APEA would certainly, yes, we can do it. We just need people to do it with us. So yeah, I hope that addressed it. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe just to come in, I know that in Africa, for example, there have been case studies where they look at sort of the state of play of the evaluation system in a number of countries in the Africa region. I'm not aware of any studies in the Asia Pacific region. Maybe that's a good takeaway. We can ask ADB to fund such a study. But also the 2020 launch at the AEW, which was virtual, was with our colleague, Mr. Siva, who's from Sri Lanka. And he presents a very nice, it's still on YouTube, you can watch it. He presents a very nice case of the Sri Lankan example. And I think that's probably the best I've ever seen of really looking at what it looks like, practically speaking, at the national level. Because there's sort of the theoretical, but there's also how do these evaluation norms fit into national planning and the National Development Plan, and then how does that link to the Sustainable Development Goals as well. And so maybe just to flag, also we have colleagues who work on results-based management and have done case studies. I know there's one of Solomon Islands, Bangladesh, and other countries in the region that look at how indicators and the results framework of the SDGs are being applied at the national level. So that series would probably have some good cross comparisons in the region. But I think it's a bit of a gap, actually, to say in a standardized way, what can we say about different countries? I also know there's a study in Latin America, Caribbean region, but not for Asia Pacific. Thanks. Maybe somebody else in the room knows of one, though. Yes. Anyone like to come in on those questions? Yeah, please.
Yeah, with regard to that gap on the studies, it's definitely something that we're also aware of. So one of the initiatives of APEA is like we just recently launched this what we call Asia Pacific Evaluation Journal. And what we are trying to do is, so this is an official publication, of studies in evaluation in the region. And it's definitely a gap because despite having to go through all of this process on having this official publication, we don't have people submitting to it. So we have a lot of stories, we have a lot of case studies, we have a lot of these things that we often share in these conferences, but never written in the academic manner, compiled in one place for for people even in other regions to refer to. So what always happens is from other regions they just come into APEA and say, oh, what can we do about this? Do you have something about this material? And it's scattered all over. So yeah, it's definitely a gap that needs to be addressed, but work in progress for sure.
Other thoughts, questions, reflections? Yeah, please.
Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Catalina Salazar, and I work with Jane and UNICEF. And maybe not a question, but to add to what Chin and Jane also said, in the past 2 years, we've been doing a lot of, we are developing this strategy on NECD. And as part of this, we presented some webinars. And it was very interesting to do these webinars and with the help of UNEDA. And after we finished the webinars, we realized we have a lot of material, but we didn't have too much budget. So we started thinking on ways on how to utilize this material, and we translated all these into animated videos. They are translated into 9 languages, I think, in this region, into Laotian, Mongolian, Thai, Vietnamese. We use our in-house capacity to translate everything, so we try to be a little bit resourceful as well. And so, not as a question, just to share that we have this available now online in the UN platform Agora. We have this as a basic of evaluation. So it was a very interesting exercise. We are now in the phase of disseminating and sharing this experience So maybe it was a very good opportunity to share this, that we have this available and that you can share with your organizations and with your networks. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Others?
My name is Sylvia Chung. I'm from Protean Consulting, Malaysia. I just have a thought about the OECD DAC standard, because as an evaluator, a lot of time, national evaluator, a lot of times when we have assignment, the terms of reference has already been set according to these standards, right? And a lot of times when we joined this assignment, we were not at the table to kind of like develop the terms of reference together with people who commissioned the evaluation. So how do you then, try to get to this more global kind of perspective, which means it's a mix of a global, local perspective, because it's like you are sort of like almost forced to kind of like succumb to the standards that has already been set, and your voice is rarely being heard, even though you may have all these different standards in your country or whatever not, but at the end of the day, the development partners are sitting somewhere in Geneva, and and so this has been quite a challenge, trying to convince the program manager that this will not work in our context and stuff like that. So, how do you then consolidate this, give a more global kind of flavor, because I think it's important not to utilize or use the standard in a very mechanistic way, but use it in a meaningful way to drive evaluation, to drive information gathering or evidence gathering that becomes meaningful to serve the people that we serve at the grassroots level, instead of like, it has to serve HQ or and we leave people behind because of that. Yeah, just comments, observation, and also ask the question of how do you consolidate and provide a more global perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Really important reflections and the call for global, mixing the global with the local. And love to hear from others' thoughts on the panel, but also get a couple. Yeah, one here and then there. Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Stuart Coop from WFP Regional Bureau. We say one size doesn't fit all, but are there some outer boundaries, about what is an evaluation that, beyond which we say, oh, that's not an evaluation? Because we have like vast institutions in huge countries that do a practice which they call evaluation, but we don't think it's really an evaluation. So do we get into the battle over the terminology, or do we just keep a broad tent and say, these things are all different practices that could be called evaluations, but ours is the real one, in terms of some kind of, I know there's all sorts of varieties within evaluation, but is there a boundary beyond which we have to step in and say, look, that's really not an evaluation, it's more like a proof of concept study or something like this. But when you have major ministries who that's what they're asking for in terms of evaluation, how do we what's our strategy or tactics in a situation like that? Thank you.
Yeah, so what's not evaluation? Sometimes it's just marketing materials, right? Let's take one more.
So
really good
so
questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm from Mongolia. I'm from Merit Project. It's so great to introduce you about the OECD glossary in Mongolia, recently published and funded by GAC project in Mongolia. So I would like to share my experience and bit challenge and same challenges with you, Ahmed, and it's a feeling that we are not orphan to translate glossary in Mongolia. So we're having same troubles and challenges. But most important thing is not only delivering capacity building training and also not only translating, publishing these documents, and most important thing is how to applicate it and how to use it in practical way. So is there is any specific, maybe some kind of tips or recommendations to accelerate that application of this glossary in Mongolia? Maybe, Ahmed, I wanted to hear your experience about it, and maybe Megan, you can help us to also to move forward to disseminate more practical experience to Mongolia. Thanks so much.
So let's get to our panel then and open up on these couple of examples, a specific question to Ahmed, and then two rather challenging questions, I think, of the bigger issues. Yeah. So who wants to come in? Yeah, you start. You kick us off.
Okay. Just a reflection, taking in mind that we have this sign of 5 minutes. So just a quick reflection, firstly, on the local aspect of the discussion. I think this is a huge discussion that we can have, but we agreed at the start that one size does not fit all, which means that we need to think about how to contextualize it to our needs. At some point, when you ask your question, when you have a key question for evaluation and you think about it, how it is linked to the project intervention. Shall we consider it under relevance or shall we consider it under effectiveness? Then you can even have a debate between the same professionals who are evaluation professionals under these questions. So at the end of the day, it's not about a solid criteria. It's about how we can serve the purpose of this evaluation. That's why we have LNAP criteria, and even within emergency criteria, one emergency criteria may not fit all the kind of emergencies. So the emergency we have in Yemen, chronic severe malnutrition, is different from the one in Syria, is even different from the one that we sorry to have it in Morocco and Libya a few days ago this week. So this is a global perspective that we need to think and contextualize it to that way. The second reflection on the evaluation and what are the boundaries of the evaluation. I think this is a huge also discussion, but what we can assure that you may talk to government officials and they are clearly mixing between monitoring and evaluation. They are thinking of as if they are monitoring their performance or process, they are evaluating it. So this is what does evaluation means for them. At the end of the day, we are not teaching them that this is the boundaries of evaluations. We are trying to get to understand their needs and try to respond to that need in a technical and professional way that can serve the purpose of the evaluation at the end of the day. And there is a huge difference definitely between the self-evaluation that they as a government who implement the interventions are doing and the independent evaluation who may lie in one entity in the government itself or even an outsider who can do this evaluation. Finally, just a reflection on the application of the used tools or the used evaluation glossary that we have. I think it should be a consultative process from the start. It should be an engagement process. You should have involved it all in the development of that tool to be utilized and to be adopted. But for the moment, if you didn't do so, you should do a kind of more of engagement events, such as webinars, such as a kind of online engagement process, and try firstly to get the consensus or the validation of the documents that you have from the professions of this task, or I mean here the evaluation professions, in order to get it adopted and rolled out in the region. And it takes time. It takes time in order to have it running. Thank you.
Yeah, let's hear from some others on this question of the boundaries. Yeah, Shamili.
Yes, so the question on how we really get the voice of the people, local people in the criteria, etc. Right? So I think the latest is OECD better criteria for better evaluation is very great in really digging down to those areas that leaving no one behind, gender equality, and even this coherence is divided into external coherence, internal coherence. And whose relevance are we talking? Is it beneficiaries or donors or government? So it's really a very good move forward that it's not really this international donors perspective, but really getting the voice of the locals. So, and the second question, about, I'd like to share about what's going on currently in Mongolia, that evaluation assessation is helping. So we are currently, we do not have, about the, not evaluation you asked, right? So evaluation is not monitoring. However, in government of Mongolia, we think monitoring is evaluation. Even the word Emeni is understood as one word. However, with the leadership of the current authority of government supervisory, he understood, okay, evaluation is different concept function. So they are trying to have maybe national evaluation policy or something that we are going to bring in the international experience of what's national evaluation policy and national evaluation system to the government. And there are only 35 countries in the world which have national evaluation policy. So we hope that we might become the 36th country, really helping them what evaluation is, not the monitoring. Thank you.
Yeah, very quickly, I'm just gonna also add with regards to the use of the standards and seconding Ahmad. It's also, like, I agree with him that for these particular standards, the engagement needs to start from the very beginning of the development process, multiple stakeholders, because it builds ownership, they have a stake, and then it's also a motivation for them to not only use, but also to spread it further. The second point that I wanted to highlight, and I think this is important because unfortunately us evaluators are very weak on this, it's communication. So this materials needs to be communicated and be made available on multiple forms, not just a printed something that you can only, like, you know, distribute face to face, but also needs to be available in multiple forms. We have multiple TikTok, YouTube, like, you know, like Google Forms, websites. All of these forms, it needs to be available and viewable out there. And the thing is, you need to make sure that there's no barrier in accessing this. I'm speaking because also as a young evaluator, there's multiple instances that, like, you know, there are resources that I wanted to access, but, like, you know, there's like, oh, this is like a confidential information. Unfortunately, in Philippines, that's always the case. They would develop materials like this, but they don't want to share because, oh, this is no, we can't share you because it's based on internal things that they don't want to share for some reason. So, yeah, so that's one thing as well. Communication strategy on these materials is what I would definitely say. And then it will come in.
Thank you. And I think for me, this question of boundaries, it's like borders and countries. And the problem with borders is you then have to put resources into defending them. And I think we as evaluators should spend zero resources on defending the borders of evaluation. I think it's a huge waste of our time and energy. And the question should be, is this study or activity useful to our purpose? So for UNICEF, as Jane said, you know, is it helping us serve children better and get better outcomes for children? In which case, you might need monitoring, you might need an evidence review, you might need a participatory reflection process, you might need lots of different things, you might need an audit. But that's not the question. So we're not in the business of doing evaluation for the sake of it. So I would say the same goes for the criteria. If the word relevance doesn't resonate with people, but people have questions about, you know, what are the questions that people need to have answered? And then start there and work your way backwards into, eventually when you submit the report to the donor, you have to put a label on it, and maybe the label goes coherence, but the word you're using to make meaning with people impacted might not be relevance, because that might not be the word that fits, and that might not be the question that needs to be answered in that context. I think we have to remember evaluations use resources, and sometimes the most useful evaluation, the most useful thing we can do is to do nothing at all, because evaluations can also cause harm. I know that we had one more speaker, one more question. Yes, please, go ahead, quickly.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Thanatat from National Economic and Social Development Council, Thailand. So I have I'm interested in the official translation. So under the cooperation with the country, so if I may ask, which process you find that is the most difficult, that may take a long time or require much more effort than the other? So just from your experience. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to follow up afterwards if others are interested in official translations. You can find the documents we referred to at oe.cd/glossary. But I think the advantage of official versions like the Islamic Development Bank or others is also that it then gets the uptake. So it's more useful in some ways, but it does sometimes take longer. One last thought, maybe coming down, we go to Jane and Ahmed, let you each have a final word.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And I think what I can say really as a last word is that it takes time, it takes effort. We should not be giving up. I think we are moving in the right direction, and there is still a lot of work ahead of us. But yeah, just creating this community of practice, ensuring that we can use some of this guidance, everything that we are translating into local languages and so forth. And then very, very importantly, it's also ensuring that we can undertake high quality evaluations as a process that can also show how we are utilizing all these norms and standards, ethical guidance, and everything that we are trying to promote. So undertaking evaluations is a good way of showing and also learning. So let's not give up. Let's just continue the journey. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll not add much. Our session slogan was, one size does not fit all, and this is what we would like to communicate at the end of the day. So thank you so much for your time and for your kind of interest, and sorry for keeping you late after 3.
And I meant to mention that the AAIB has also brought some pamphlets which are here on the table, which show an institutional adaptation of their evaluation approach. It's quite interesting. You can grab